Welcome to Happy Progress, the podcast focused on helping you think differently about growth and success. I'm Alex Harris, and today I'm interviewing Jordan Gall. Jordan is the founder and CEO of CartHook, a successful Shopify app that does post-purchase upsells, the ability to increase your average order value for your Shopify store. But it's really a great story about growth for a startup or business in general and isn't always happy. This story will really resonate with you. And if you want to hear more, you can subscribe, like, and follow the Happy Progress podcast for more great interviews from startup founders and growth success stories. Now let's get started with the interview with Jordan Gall. Hi, and welcome to the Happy Progress podcast. I'm here with Jordan Gall. How you doing, Jordan?
I'm doing very well. Thanks for having me on.
Excellent. To get started, I would like to know, does progress equal happiness to you?
Oh boy, I can't help but have them linked in my mind. If I think about times of unhappiness or stress or frustration, it's pretty tied to inability to make progress. Something's in the way, I'm getting in the way, something else is. And when things are growing, it's much easier to be happy. So it's tough to separate the two.
Yeah. We've spoken before in the past. Actually, it's been about 7 years.
Yeah,
I interviewed you previously in 2014. And I think you are a great example of overall happy progress, making daily improvements over time that can really compound for overall accelerated growth. And that is pivotal in your career. Let's take it back a little bit. You originally had an e-commerce site with your brothers. You sold that, and then you pivoted to several different businesses, and you ended up creating a SaaS product that filled a very specific need. That SaaS product is related to the Shopify checkout process, where you can customize it and overall improve the revenue from your store. Yeah. And then you added on top of that to be able to do post-purchase upsells and increasing the average order value of customers. And now what I learned is that you have partnered with Shopify to put CartHook into the Shopify store, and now you're going to be able to reach even more people. Take us a little bit through that.
Yeah, and that is progress, but it was not a straight line, and it was not all happy. And I think a lot of that came from impatience on my part. Before starting CartHook, I felt like I did a new business every year or so, and I really wanted it to take off faster. And if it didn't, I dropped it. I remember like a story that someone told me about Noah Kagan. And I think someone asked him, like, how come everything you do works? Like, how come like you have a golden touch? And he was like, oh, that's not it at all. I just have a high standard for what works. And if something doesn't work, then I'm not just going to keep putting time into it. And if it works and it takes off, that you can kind of feel that, and that's what you stick with. And I think that's smart. And I took that mindset to heart, and I think I overdid it. I was impatient. And where CartHook really started paying off dividends was in over the long term. So in the beginning years, I was frustrated a lot because I wanted things to go faster. And the abandoned cart product didn't quite go fast enough, and I was very open to another idea. We had gotten it to like 20K in MRR, which is fine, but it was like 18 months in, or almost two years in, and I was very open to another idea. In this case, it worked because the next idea was a better idea. But even then, another year spent on that new idea, difficult to get traction. And then as it took off more, like now we're in year 5, and now it's compounding. Now is the payoff, which is, I don't really like that time frame. I want things to go faster. But most times it takes longer than you want it to.
Yeah, you were initially looking for that instant gratification of building something and seeing the results, and kind of figuring out how your product market fit and everything else. It just took a little bit longer than you expected.
Yeah, and the truth is, we got the product right at the right time in the right market. So we had demand. We had really strong demand the entire time. We've always had an issue of how to deal with too much inbound, which is a great problem to have, but it is a problem to figure out. And we didn't make that much progress because we couldn't get the product right at first. It's a tough product, and we didn't really fully understand everything around the product. and how sensitive a checkout product is and how you can't have any issues. You can't have any downtime at all. The reliability has to be there. The speed has to be there. So that's the part that took time for us.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the bigger issue is that I wasn't very good on the happiness side along the way, because I very often equated our MRR with my happiness. And if it wasn't going fast enough, then I wasn't that happy. And that took work, because I have a great life. I have a great marriage. I have 3 kids. I really don't have much to complain about. I really should be walking around happier. And I was letting a lot of that equation of myself and the business success like be too closely tied with my happiness.
And now you're the CEO. And can you talk a little bit about the evolution of you now running a company and doing real business, scaling it, taking angel investors, a lot of that scenario?
Yeah, that journey around the CEO role, that's really what led to more happiness. So the way the arc went was, at first I viewed it pretty cynically or pretty coldly. I had an e-commerce business and it went pretty well, but we sold it not because it was some giant exit. We sold it because we didn't really like the future of it. And the biggest issue around that was we didn't have recurring revenue. So if we didn't put in another 25 grand into advertising, we wouldn't get the revenue the next month. And that sounded like a treadmill to me. And to get it bigger and more successful, I just needed to increase the speed on the treadmill. And that didn't sound like any fun. So when I got into software, thinking to myself, I want recurring revenue. I want to deliver a product that once you make a sale, that person gets added to your customer list. You continue providing them value. They keep paying, and then you can build on that month over month. Mm-hmm. So I was looking at it like pretty clinically. And when I started the business, that's how I approached it. There was a few of us, and what we talked about internally a lot is like, let's make some money. Let's get customers and do this. And very quickly realized that's not enough to build a company on. And it's not some big revelation that I can take credit for. It was actually my co-founder that pulled me aside one day and said, look, man, we have to go beyond like the let's make money thing. These employees are here. They don't have the same mindset as you. They don't have the same equity as you. Like, we need to provide them work that they enjoy and is fulfilling and that they want to come to work every day. And that was like a really important wake up. And from there to where we are now, the CEO role changed from like the lead sales moneymaker to how do I provide an environment that attracts amazing people? And that arc has been so fulfilling, right? I've had issues because I come from an immigrant entrepreneur household, and the mindset's kind of different. It is what it is. And I had a difficulty identifying with an employee that didn't have that same mindset. And it took me a while to kind of bridge that gap, because what I didn't want to do that inauthentically. I didn't want to say, well, we're making the world a better place, therefore that's our mission. Move on. Because that didn't feel honest to me. And so I had to search around for what is the authentic version for me of more meaning than just revenue. And we found it in helping our customers become successful. Because we get to know our customers. When they're successful, it's not just this metric that goes up. It's like their business grows, they hire more people, they're closer to their dreams, they're closer to providing for their families. And like that's what I can authentically get into. Yeah. So it's that and the employee satisfaction and watching employees kind of blossom into their talents. That is so much more fulfilling than I expected it would be when I first started, when I was like, yo, let's build a product that has recurring revenue. Let's do this. So it's a lot better now.
Yeah. Well, I think it's some key characteristics of your leadership, really putting, first of all, everything you do, you put out in public. You do a ton of podcast interviews. You have your own podcast. You're really open and transparent about what you do out there. And your leadership qualities really come off really well. I've heard you talk about really improving your revenue per employee and moving beyond that money as that motivator. To create more fulfilling and challenging work, because it doesn't matter how much money we have, that's not going to fulfill our purpose or our meaning to create or serve.
Yeah. And it's not that they're disconnected from one another. It's not that the goal is happiness. It's that happiness leads to success on the revenue side and on the company side. The revenue and churn rate, conversion, all that, those are lagging indicators of the health of your business, your team, and your product. So if you can focus on how to make a great product with great people working on it, it's not that it just automatically works out on the revenue side, it's that it's much more likely to work out. So when I'm looking at metrics at MRR and churn, conversion, and so on this month, that's an indicator of how healthy the company has been over the past 6 months and which direction it's going in. So they're definitely connected, and this isn't a charity. We're trying to make money. That is the point of the business, but they are closely tied.
Yeah. And I want to just call out that you're thinking about things way beyond the immediate next steps. You're very proactive, you're resilient. And I think it overall kind of boils down to having abundance or a growth mindset, because not only are you trying to make your customers more satisfied, but you are creating a best-in-class product. And I've seen you say that as you become more successful, you tend to learn more about yourself.
Yeah, I think that's true. The whole thing is revealing. My favorite part of the CEO role is that it is a new job every 6 months. And that impatience, that's one of my characteristics, is perfectly suited for a job that changes every 6 months. So it does not stay stationary, and I don't get impatient because it is just completely different today than it was 6 months ago, and night and day difference from 12 months ago, and then again from 2 years ago. So that part's fun. I think it does require, maybe not require, but maybe it helps to have a generally optimistic mindset, because I'm not actually very good at work. I'm not good at execution. I'm not good at making my way down a to-do list. I'm not even good at keeping an organized to-do list. What I like to do is live in the future. And I like to think about what's coming up and why we should be going in a certain direction. And it's been a huge relief to have the resources to build a team that all of the people on the team are better than I am at their jobs. They're all better. And maybe at first you encounter some resistance around hiring someone who's directly, obviously better than you are at a specific job that you used to do. But once you get over that and settle into it and are proud of the fact that you can attract that type of person, it frees you up to be honest with yourself. And that was one of the most important things of my entire journey through this company. I was holding myself up against other people's standards, and I was listening to podcasts with successful people, and I was feeling bad about myself. And I heard about how they were doing things, and I thought I should do it like that. And it really took me saying, well, I'm just not them, I'm me. And what I'm good at is having conversations on Zoom calls. And so what if all of Twitter says your calendar should be clear and that's the goal? That's not the best work for me. For me, having a conversation with a VC and then an integration partner and then a merchant and then a peer, that's a good day of work for me. And so maybe that's different for someone else, but so it took a while to get into that zone of comfort, especially around just these different functions inside the company being handled by people who are clearly better than I am at them.
Yeah. Well, having that self-awareness to understand what your strengths and weaknesses are is key in leadership in general. And as a manager or a leader, you probably should be hiring people who are smarter than you because you want to level up the team and bring it to those new standards. But along the way, I've heard you talk about some of the things some gotchas that came out of nowhere, like when you're first building your checkout process, and Shopify told you that they didn't want you leveraging the Shopify API, and they wanted you to take on your own payments. That sounds like a major pivot, because it takes a huge investment to take on that much money.
That we are going through one right now. So that was a huge, just taking on a second.
Can you elaborate
product.
on what's going on right now?
Sure. So a few years ago we had the cart abandonment product, and then just to make the decision to take on a second product when you have a team of 4 people, only 2 of them engineers, and you have $100,000 in the bank, and you're burning 10, 15K a month. That was That was pretty challenging. And then to build it and then have Shopify say, actually, you can't do it. You can't be in the App Store. That also was challenging. And then making that work anyway was tough. A lot of these moments are just, the way I think about it is like you sit down in front of a chessboard that you did not start the game. You just get to look at the pieces and where they are, and then you have to make the best of it. It doesn't matter if this corner is a mess and you can't get out of it. Like, you just have to figure it out based on what's presented to you. You have control over some of it, but a lot of it you just don't have control over. And so we grew the product nicely. And then recently we got into a partnership with Shopify that allows us to build a post-purchase offer app that works inside the Shopify checkout. And what that means is we'll be in the Shopify App Store for the first time. So we'll finally have the distribution we've always wanted. On the other hand, we are also agreed to not take on any new customers to our existing product. So we just built this product for 4 years. We processed $1.5 billion on it, and now it can't take on new customers. So that's a new forced pivot, but I'm excited about it. The whole team's excited about it. So I think it's going to be great for us, but it's now something new.
Yeah, I mean, growing pains. I mean, I heard you say several million in ARR, and things still just aren't perfect. And what type of what are you going through right now? You're rebuilding the app for the store.
We are building a completely new app.
Wow.
We built a completely new app in 60 days.
Oh my
so
God.
Yes, while running the checkout product that does $80 million a month in GMV through it. So we had to build a second team to build a new product in 60 days. So all these things are they're challenges. It's like, my CTO and we just laugh at this stuff because it's like, well, as soon as we get done with this, there will be another crazy hurdle to get over. But at this point, we have been running around the track enough times and going over enough hurdles that that's our job. Our job is literally to figure out what's the next hurdle, how to get over it. So it's not like this big cataclysmic, oh no, what are we going to do moment? It is, okay, what are our resources? What can we do? What can't we do? And how do we make the best of it?
Well, it's great to see Shopify really helping their partners out, because they probably maybe not easily, they could have created it themselves.
Yeah, and they could have nuked us. They could have just said, we don't want you to exist anymore. It wasn't an easy process with them, but at the end of the day, they did the right thing. They are behaving fairly with us. And on our side, there's a lot to be proud of, right? We basically pulled post-purchase upsells from the ClickFunnels and digital marketing world, and we pulled it up into the direct-to-consumer world with Native Deodorant and Magic Spoon and Goldie and all these really high-quality merchants that care a lot about about their shoppers and their brand. And so we pulled that up effectively enough into the right sphere of e-commerce that Shopify, this is an acknowledgement by them that yes, there's demand for this, and B, this is becoming a best practice. So we should not just allow it on our platform, but actually promote it, which is something that'll happen later this month.
Mm-hmm. So how are you now thinking? You have a podcast on bootstrapping. How are you thinking about bootstrapping at this point?
So the way I say it is we cheated at bootstrapping. We took on some money. We raised about $1 million total, but we kept the characteristics of a bootstrap company. Every dollar we raised, we aimed to get profitable on, and we did that. And over a few different rounds, we did $275K and got profitable, and then another $250K and got profitable, and then another like $900K and got profitable. So it was always, how do we give ourselves the resources we need, but while also avoiding the go big or go home kind of binary outcome scenario, right? The VC very often is purposely binary. It either becomes huge or it doesn't work out. And that's the bargain going into it. We didn't want that for CartHook. We wanted to protect our downside. We wanted to make sure it was a success. We were uninterested in the potential of a zero outcome. And so it's a very bootstrapper kind of mentality and approach, but with a little bit more fuel in the tank. Not too much, but just enough to do things that maybe we couldn't do on our revenue at that time.
Yeah, that makes sense. Let's get into some specifics about Shopify. I get a lot of questions when setting up a Shopify site, and probably the most basic one is, why is the Shopify checkout different, just in general, than the rest of the site? Why can't you customize it from the get go?
Yeah, that's a complicated topic. Is my honest answer. Generally speaking, one of the things that Shopify was extremely successful in doing is providing a very, very reliable checkout. And that is something that is easily taken for granted these days, but it was not always the case. And I mean, I tried to buy one of those Elgato like lights, the key lights. When I tell you I could not check out on this, I could not give my money this site. It took me weeks. It would flash and then it would say successful transaction and bring me back to the checkout. And we take it for granted now, but the Shopify checkout is unbelievably reliable. It works on every device all the time, everywhere. And that is the foundation of their platform. And they have a bunch of stuff on the front end. They have Liquid and they have themes and they have agencies working on the front end. And on the back end, they have a great API with documentation and a third-party app ecosystem. But where it all comes together is the checkout. And so they are rightfully protective of it. And they focus much more than other e-commerce platforms on innovating at the checkout. So Shop Pay, it is a genuinely phenomenal buying experience. You go through it once, and the next time you come back, it recognizes you. If you're cookied, you go right to the end. If you're not cookied, as soon as you type in your email address, you get the SMS authentication. Then it pushes you forward. It is a fantastic buying experience. And so that's why Shopify is very protective of it, as well as, practically speaking, their market cap is directly linked to the amount of GMV that goes through that checkout. So it's, from a business point of view and a product point of view, it's hugely important. Yeah,
that's really interesting. And let's talk about people who are now setting up Shopify sites. What I've heard a lot of people give a recommendation to build an audience and then worry about the money later. What would be your recommendation to that strategy?
So that is a great approach these days. I think it's not the only approach. There's something happening in the web in 2020 that allows individual people to accrue the level of value that normally would be restricted to a large company, right? I think of Jeffree Star. One or two people with a YouTube channel can launch a product and do whatever they did, $25 million in a day or an hour, these unbelievable numbers. And it's because of that one-to-many relationship with audiences these days. One or two people can have relationships that are normally reserved for an entire media organization. So it is true that leverage has never existed the way it exists right now. And so that's where the concept of build an audience and then launch a product comes from. It makes a lot of sense. But it's not the only way to do it. You don't have to build an audience. Right. You can go the other way. You can ignore audience entirely. I know plenty of people who are very quietly making great livings and nobody knows who they are. Nobody even knows that their product is linked to them in any way. So there's no one way to do it. The audience building thing is pretty unique to modern time. And if I were starting something from scratch, I would acknowledge that and probably work toward it. But it's not the only way to do it.
Yeah. Are you seeing trends in Shopify in general, especially after COVID? A lot of people are opening their own e-commerce sites. People need or want a second income because they don't want to rely on their main job in case they do have problems. Are you seeing opportunities in certain industries more than others?
More than ever. E-commerce, more opportunity than ever. It's what we saw. Look, when COVID hit and everything got a little scary. It got real scary, actually. I was like every other business owner. I thought, well, this thing might all go away, and I'm going to pull back. I had a $7,000 wire on the way from my bank to a marketing partner's that I stopped. I emailed them and I said, sorry, can't give you the sending $7,000 out of my bank account right now doesn't make any sense to me. So I went into semi-panic of, okay, let's chill on expenses. Let's just see what happens here. We were fortunate enough to be in the e-commerce world where from that day to 60 days later, our business doubled. Wow. Yep. And our business doubling means hundreds and hundreds of e-commerce sites doubling. And that is an index, a small microcosm of what happened to Shopify itself, which is why the stock is kind of where it is. And so there's a lot of pain out there, a lot of suffering. My younger brother runs Crunch gym franchises in New York City, just about the roughest business you could possibly be in during COVID, other than like restaurants. Right. But e-commerce is one of those areas that is booming. And it will continue to boom. Have you seen that hockey stick graph?
Yeah.
The adoption, like 6 weeks compared to the 10 years. I don't see that dissipating in any way.
Well, Shopify has really lowered the barrier of entry of getting in and starting from a money perspective, investing, or just time. You can put up a Shopify site in about an hour these days. Obviously, having a good product is key. But let's talk about the future, forward thinking. Let's talk about where is e-commerce going and where do you think Shopify is basically headed?
I think this is like the stuff I'm most interested in. I am really interested to see how Shopify handles the trend toward headless. The higher end merchants want additional freedom over the shopper experience and over their tech stack.
Right.
And that is starting to pull on a thread that I would assume Shopify is concerned about. Because when your storefront exists on another service, you don't have the same relationship with Shopify as you do if everything is on Shopify. And that's what's happening. Right today, announcement, Builder.io raised a seed round. Swell, Nacelle, Shogun, these companies are starting to allow the merchant to have more freedom over the front end. Swell is actually back end, but most of these are front ends, and I'm curious to see what Shopify does with it, because that is an interesting trend for the higher end to work through, and you can see how Shopify's checkout becomes even more important in that context. Because if you have your storefront elsewhere, that's one thing, but as long as your payments are running through Shopify's checkout, it's more acceptable. And so, in a world where a successful Plus store doing $50 million annually has their storefront on a different service, and then the back end is run by all these third-party apps, like Shopify's role in that equation is different, and it will be really interesting to see how they adapt to it.
Mm-hmm. So headless, we're separating the data from the CMS, and essentially you can do anything you want with that with your data and your inventory. I see a lot of people really taking advantage of this with internal search, being able to distribute your search on product pages in a completely different way, and then maybe you're leveraging that same data for your apps or other displays. Is that kind of what you're seeing with headless?
Yes. So at the long tail end of things, at the 80% of Shopify users really don't care about this.
Right.
This is really not very relevant. Mm-hmm. They have a great, reliable platform. They have themes on the front end. They can make customizations. They can work with a network of agencies. The app ecosystem extends the functionality of the platform to whatever they need, whether it's subscriptions or post-purchase upsells or email marketing or whatever else. But it's at the higher end that's pushing and stretching the Shopify platform. That's where at least my head is. That's where I'm most interested in. Those are the merchants that I want to work with and so on. So that's kind of where my focus is.
Yeah, well, moving from mid-market to like enterprise, that would make sense for a headless situation, because most enterprises are probably not going to look at Shopify right now or Shopify Plus, even though it will work for them. It may be not in their mindset. For some reason, they want to build custom stuff or spend a lot of money on big applications.
That's right. Now, they are winning some enterprises, but I actually look at it the other way. As Shopify Plus stores grow, can Shopify keep them on Shopify, mm-hmm. or do they graduate out? It used to be a given. At some point, you graduate out to something else. A lot of merchants would prefer not to graduate out. They'd prefer to just make it work and not re-platform.
Right.
So I'm sure Shopify's putting a ton of resources toward Plus merchants and understanding what they need in order to not graduate out and to have the platform graduate alongside them.
It's very interesting because I know a lot of customers who are on enterprise platforms move off of those onto Shopify just to make it easier and remove all those additional expenses.
Yes. But then you, like anything in e-commerce platform related, you now deal with a different set of trade-offs.
Right.
You do not get everything you want. That's out. That's not possible. So it's which trade-offs, which priorities are you willing to compromise on?
Right. Like wholesale or more advanced or
Right.
cohorts of different prices versus different customers, B2B and things like that.
Yeah.
That's super interesting. Recently I created a Shopify store for a freelance client and I signed up for Kit. Have you seen how Shopify is using AI built into like Facebook and things like that? They're doing some really interesting advanced technology. Have you had any experience with this?
So I don't have direct experience with Kit, but I see that in that larger context that we were just talking about. The question is, can any company satisfy both ends of the market? Right? Because you can see something like Kit that they acquired from, through an acquisition, like that got brought into the company through an acquisition. That makes sense because it helps people get started. The same way, what was it called? Oberlo? Right? That got acquired also because it helped newcomers opening new stores to find products to sell. Because that clearly is one of the issues to figure out. Okay, I have a Shopify store. I want to sell things online. I don't know what to sell. So Oberlo addressed that. So these are all things that are aimed at that 80%. Can they satisfy?
What is Oberlo?
Oberlo. So it connects directly to AliExpress, Alibaba, and allows you to search and then just easily add the product to your Shopify store. So if you want a Shopify store but don't know what to sell, Oberlo, that app that Shopify also acquired, will allow you to find products and connect with them and then sell them online and then have it shipped directly from AliExpress. So it's just lowering the barrier to getting into business, which is Shopify's that's their real purpose.
Yeah.
But can they do that and also satisfy Shopify Plus merchants who want headless? Like that's a big task. And they have a market cap to match, but still a challenge.
Yeah. And with all these Shopify sites, it's really focused on how much you can niche and solve the user's problem. Focusing on like landing pages and then the whole funnel process, which you've got into, post-purchase funnels, really just creating these isolated experiences to solve the customer's problems is kind of like the new way of marketing your stores. Is this something that has this been your focus, and where's it going?
So I'll be honest on this front. The two things at the same time. One, I am completely convinced that that's exactly right. That your store is your hub, and that is where your returning shoppers and your organic search and your email marketing and so on, that is where they come through. But your paid traffic and your targeted, let's say, promotions alongside influencers, they should go through spokes that are tailored specifically to that audience with that offer. And I'm convinced that that's the right way to do it. And if I was running an e-commerce business myself, that's how I would run my traffic. At the same time, we built that into our product and we really didn't get the adoption we expected. So a vast majority, 80% plus of the GMV that goes through our checkout comes from inside the store.
Right.
Yes, there are certain customers that they hear that and it blows their mind and they say, that means I could have a different landing page for every campaign and a different checkout page for every campaign and a different set of upsells for that campaign. And that's where they go. But it has not gotten adoption in the wider market, partly because of technical limitations, but also behavioral and just how people are used to doing things and how agencies are doing things.
Yeah, that's interesting. It makes sense in the info marketing world and even for products to be able to just upsell, smaller versions of whatever you're buying. Just the ability to have post-purchase upsells while the user essentially has their credit card out or has entered their information already. I mean, that's the key, I assume, to CartHook's success.
Yeah, what we allowed merchants to do is offer post-purchase upsells. And it is worth just defining that for a second. The way to think about it is Amazon's "you may also like" feature. That is a pre-purchase upsell. That is, you are buying this coffee maker, and maybe you'll also like these coffee filters that fit for that coffee maker. And then it's asking you to add that to the cart together and then buy them together. What we did is we took that offer and put it behind the checkout page. So there isn't a new buying decision and there isn't additional friction to the purchase. You just buy the coffee maker. And then only once you buy the coffee maker, then in between the checkout page and the thank you page, you'll see an additional landing page with an offer for, how about these coffee filters that work with your coffee maker? And just click here to add it to your order. So it's a one-click upsell that's based on what the shopper is buying in the checkout page.
Wow.
And that really worked. So out of that $1.5 billion that I mentioned has gone through our checkout, 175 million of it is through the post-purchase upsells. So this is like 12% revenue increase, that is significant for one thing to do.
Let's talk about Shopify apps. Obviously, it's a big opportunity if you wanted to create a Shopify app out there these days. What advice would you give to a developer or someone who has an idea about creating a Shopify app? How would they get started? Really, any advice that you'd like to share?
I think it's a tough world these days on that front. The competition is extreme
Because there's so many apps.
There's so many apps. The Shopify App Store, because it's now crowded, doesn't quite do the same thing that it used to do. Right? You used to launch an app in there, and if you caught on, you could get popular pretty quickly and build a business around that. It takes more work these days to stand out, to get great reviews, to compete. There's venture money making its way into the ecosystem. These software companies are improving in quality, in their ability to market, in their branding. It's a bigger world. It's a very big pie. If I were starting it now, I would identify something pretty niche, pretty clear. I like to look at what Kurt Elster, right? He has a few Shopify apps, and they came directly from his experience with customers, with his freelance clients, right, or his agency clients, and he's solving a need for them. I personally like to look at the higher end of the market because the willingness to pay is higher if you solve their problems. Right. I as long as I've been in the Shopify world, I don't really feel that qualified to really answer that. The truth is, we've been on the outside for years. We've never been in the Shopify App Store until later this month.
Yeah, it seems like a very similar trend to the Apple App Store. Forever
huge opportunity.
Yeah, huge opportunity, and then all of a sudden it got crowded, and now you're lucky if you even get several app downloads. Yeah,
the bar is raised. Right. The bar to get over on quality, on attention and marketing and the problem that you're solving and all that, it's a lot higher.
Right. Before we close out, I'd love to tell people about how they can find out more about you and connect.
Absolutely. So for the company, you check out CartHook.com. And if you go there, you'll notice that there's a coming soon page, and people can sign up to get notified for when our new app launches at the end of October. And we got some goodies that we give alongside that early access and like being able to see what we're doing, and then some offers as we get closer to launch. And then myself, I'm at Jordan Gall on Twitter, and I do a weekly podcast with my good friend Brian Castle called Bootstrapped Web, where we call it the Low Light Podcast. It's like anything but highlights, like just the mistakes, things we've learned, what we're struggling with. Very rarely the boisterous success stories, but I think that's the real stuff.
Nice. To close out, what would be one piece of advice that you'd provide for entrepreneurs to really go from zero to growth?
I'd say settle in. Find something that you like enough to do for a long period of time. A lot of the entrepreneurs, the vast majority of the people that I know that are in this game that are successful have been doing it for a long period of time. And usually, almost always, the beginning was not pretty. And to get through that, you're going to have to really care about what you're doing, or otherwise you're just going to drop it and move on to the next thing. Yeah, I would say settle in, plan for a longer journey than you expect, but also plan for it to be worth it.
Thank you for making Happy Progress part of your day. How are you going to take advantage every day? Please let Alex know by visiting the website happyprogress.com. Together we will prove that progress equals happiness.